Hello and welcome to the second edition of Totem Tuesday. This week we are going to be looking at both crows and ravens. Now there's so much mythology and folklore about crows and ravens that we're only going to be touching the surface in this video. There's so many stories through every culture in the world that I'd be here for many hours if I was going to go into all of it in depth, but hopefully there should be a few pointers and a few hints and tips you'll be able to take on board to research a little bit more about the wonderful, magnificent and mysterious crow. Now crows and ravens are the same family. Ravens are a little bigger than crows, a little bit shaggier in appearance than crows, and are more loners than crows. Crows are very sociable. I think you know that if you see them in fields or see them in parks. They have a very strong family unit and they all look after each other in the family unit as well. So there's a few misconceptions about crows that we'll hopefully be able to bring to light in this video, and also there's a wealth of folklore which should give you some inspiration about how to work with crow energy. So, crows are kind of like Marmite, aren't they? You either really love them like I do, or you find them aggravating and annoying, or maybe a bit scared of them because the massive amount of negative folklore there's been about them pretty much mainly since medieval times. Before then you didn't find so much negative folklore about them. Yes, they've always had a link to death, but it wasn't a link to be feared as much. It was more they acted in a role as guide between the worlds. But since medieval times, and very highly Christianised times, in this country anyway, they've been linked to death in a negative way. They've been linked to being unclean, which is actually a real fallacy, because they're exceptionally clean. Their nests are exceptionally clean. Not even the babies poop in their nests. You know, this is a very clean living bird. As you probably are aware, they are exceptionally clever. They are known as, by some, to be the cleverest of birds, and they have a really high IQ. I was reading this book where these scientists gave the same task to a couple of crows and to a couple of primates, a couple of monkeys. And there's this one task that the monkeys just couldn't get. They just couldn't handle. They were just like, I can't do it. Not only could the crows do this task, but they also found new inventive ways to solve the puzzle each time they did it. So not only did they solve the puzzle that the chimpanzees and the monkeys couldn't solve, they found new inventive ways of solving it each time they did it. Crows are so clever, and they know it. There's a little bit of smart-ass smugness about them, which I think is pretty well deserved. Also, crows can recognise people's faces very well. They recognise faces. If they get close to someone, or if they have reason to recognise someone, they seem to be able to recognise them. And in the same book I read of a tale where a not very nice chap shot, I think with a pellet gun, hopefully not a real gun, at this crow that was above his roof. And it, thankfully, didn't hit the crow. But the crow came back day after day, spitting berry seeds at this person every time he came out of the house, which I think is genius. Which just goes to show the humour of the crow, the intelligence of the crow, and the fact is they'll think about it and they'll bring some revenge on you. So not ones to be messed with. I've also seen crows think of ways to get at other animals as well. They're very clever, they work together to get what they want. The thing well known about crows also is their call, the sound they make. It's not the most ethereal and beautiful, but it's it really hits you. It's a very raw and powerful sound. And even though the crow's cawing, or the crow's call, all the sounds to us, human ears, sound very similar. Each caw means something different, and each caw has its own meaning, its own word, which the group, the family, the flock will understand. One thing I found really interesting about crows, because I often go and feed them on the heath, I just love going to see them, is that no matter how cold or maybe outside it is, or cold or hungry they may be, they have sentinels on a watch out. And when there may be danger, especially when the crows are feeding, there's always going to be a sentinel watching out for danger. Because when crows are feeding, they're at their most vulnerable. So there's usually 2 or more sentinels watching out while the rest of the crows are feeding. And they, even when I arrive sometimes with the bread, they call to call other birds over without actually taking any of the bread themselves. And it was quite funny the other week when I had a croissant and I was walking on the park with my croissant and they were all kind of following me, and I was just smiling, and I couldn't help but give them some of my croissant. And of course this is an upgrade. This wasn't old bread, this was a nice buttery croissant. And they were following me, and they were opening their mouths and jumping up and down, almost saying, "In here, come on!" And it was brilliant. They've got such humour. There's, I keep mentioning the human intelligence, communication. These are all practical things you can work with if crow is your totem. You've also got the very magical link to them. I'm going to go into a few of the myths of crows and ravens from around the world in a minute, but crows represent alchemy with their beautiful black feathers. They represent, the beautiful, and in the sunlight, when these have been around for a while now, these aren't the healthiest of feathers, but a healthy crow feather, the sun will show lovely colours of blues and purples and deep greens in the black, and their gorgeous black feathers represent the womb, represent the night, represent the potential, the chaos before the birth of the universe. And this links crows very strongly all around the world with creation myths. So that's a very powerful energy to work with crows. Creation through acting, creation through calling. You'll find that in myths from Australia to Ireland to Alaska, myths about crow being the creator, the trickster, but also usually a hero as well. So magic, alchemy, the power to create, the voice, communication and calling, and even though as I said earlier, the call isn't often that beautiful, apparently when they sing to call to their mate, they do sound quite beautiful. It's just a rumour, but so these are things you can work with crow energy and crow magic. Crows represent also the psychopomp, which means the guide that will lead you between life and death to the other world, the underworld, wherever. So in the film in the 90s, The Crow, with Brandon Lee, the crow in that film represented the psychopomp, the guide between the world of the living and the dead, and that's not just for that movie, that's come from many myths. It's been a helpful spirit to guide through life and death, but of course, as later days came, that became something to be afraid of. In some cultures, I think in America too, I think it makes in Alaska, I'll do the Googling, I'll find out. If a crow crosses your path and calls 3 times, then that's meant to represent death. So there's still that kind of fear aspect with crows, but I don't see that fear aspect with them. I see the power and the knowledge. They represent prophecy as well. I'll come to why in just a second as well. Prophecy, but also past lives. So they kind of span all time. They kind of exist out of time and see all. So watching, vision, magic, the list goes on. There's so many things we can look at with crow magic. And crow is your totem. Now, as I was saying, we've got some of the myths from around the world. Obviously, do feel free to follow these up and find out more. There's an interesting myth that comes from not all areas, but I've seen this myth come from ancient Greece and from Aboriginal Australia and also Native American cultures, that the crow was once white. And through some adventure, misdemeanour, quest, naughtiness, got turned black. So I thought it was interesting that this myth, this story of the crow once being white and then turned black, penetrates all the fabrics of mythology. In Greece, ancient Greece, Apollo, he's quite funny this, because, well, Apollo and the raven was Apollo's bird. And there's 2 versions of this that I've seen, that one day the crow or the raven brought back bad news to Apollo, and Apollo was angry and turned the white crow black. The other story is that the crow was sent out on a mission to get some water for Apollo, and he got distracted by waiting for a fig tree to ripen. And he was like, oh, I'll wait for this tree, there's going to be nice fruit. And because he didn't do as he's told, because he deviated from the plan, Apollo wasn't happy. And yes, turned the white crow black. So again, we've got the duality, life and death, light and dark, creation, beginning, with the black and the white there, yin and yang. But I quite like this, because in the version where you know, the crow does his own thing instead of doing what he's told, that's very much crow, isn't it? The crows are so intelligent, they're like, yeah, I could do what you want me to do, but I've got a better idea for now. They seem, as I mentioned, to have that beautiful intelligence and fun element about them where they're not obeyers, they do their own thing. So I quite like that version of the story. And also in Aboriginal Australian myth, Crow brought fire to mankind, and through many adventures of travelling through the dreaming, caused a bushfire and singed his white feathers black. So that myth comes up there as well. Nearer to my home, the Celtic myth and legend, and near to my heart as well, the crow is very much linked with the Irish goddess, the Morrigan. Show you my little painting of the Morrigan. Here we go. So there's plenty of the Morrigan, and we have plenty of crows or ravens around her. Yeah, where to start? There's so much myth here, but I don't want to kind of go on for hours and hours. It's something, if you're interested in, you can take up reading a bit more about. But the goddess Morrigan and crows are rarely seen without each other. I've got a couple of statues of the goddess Morrigan, and this one as well. There she is, Morrigan, crow on her shoulder. Her name is Battle Crow, one of her names. She's always, maybe she could be seen as a crow. A guise of the Morrigan is called Bad, and I think, to pronounce it correctly again, I'm sure I'm doing it wrong, my bad pronunciations, but Bad Catha means battle crow, if you translate it. So the crow and its warrior-like aspect, the crow and whoever had Morrigan on their side within battle was sure to be doing well, would be sure to win. Whoever was not with her would be terrified of her, would be terrified of the crows and terrified of the energy that she'd bring. And because crows are carrion, or they eat anything, from croissants to rotten meat, because they're carrion, I guess obviously the link was that they'd be seen on the battlefield pecking at the corpses, so the link to battle is there. But there's so much about the Morrigan, and there'll be more videos on the Morrigan, that's for sure. And prophecy is linked with this as well, and healing, you know, of course, the power to give life, the power to take away life. And because of the role of the crow and the raven, this goes for both of them, as the traveller between the worlds, you've got the initiation aspect as well, from one life to another life, leaving one thing behind, starting something new. So that's where the initiation aspect of the crow comes in as well. Right, what else have I got here? I think we're going to move on to ravens for a second now. I think I've maybe. What do you think? Move on to ravens? Yeah, move on to ravens. Okay. Going to Norse mythology, we're going to look at ravens. The god Odin, the Allfather, is often seen as a crow or a raven. That it's definitely one of his symbols. And he has two ravens that are seen with him. One called, I'm going to say it rightly, Hugin and Munin. So Hugin and Munin. And Munin, sorry. Oh, terrible at pronunciations. Anyone that's really into Norse mythology will be slapping me at the moment for my bad pronunciations. Hugin and Munin. And Hugin is thought and Munin is memory. So the idea that Odin would send these birds out there, these ravens, one thought, one memory, to bring back knowledge or to send out knowledge, is really interesting, and gives the idea that maybe our thoughts and our memories are not part of us. Maybe there's something outside of us that come to us and leave us, and just an idea. But yeah, the two ravens, thought and memory, were the messengers of Odin, and in many parts of the world, crows and ravens are known to be messengers of the divine, messengers of the gods. From Japan as well, the ravens pulled the fairy queen's chariot as well, so that there is just this lovely ethereal magical link to ravens and crows all over the world. And here in London, Londinium, we go to the Tower of London, We go to the ravens that are kept there, and we go to World War II, when the Tower of London was bombed, and the ravens escaped. Gasp. And Churchill, who was initiated a druid, panicked. Yes, of course panicked because London's being bombed, but also he immediately, or very quickly anyway, I don't quite know his timing on this, but quite quickly, went to, I think, Wales, to get some young ravens to bring them to the Tower of London. Because he was a druid, as we know, he was initiated as a druid. And any druid would know the story of Bran the Blessed. Now Bran, his name means raven, or crow, so you can get the idea that the superhero stories of Bran are linked to the stories of the crow, of the raven. And before the Tower of London was in its place that it is now, there was, in myth, and in hopefully, I like to think that there was, a burial mound there, a white mound, which was sort of built over with the Tower of London. But before, there was a white mound. And when Bran was slain, he was an oracular head. When his head came off, he kept on talking. He wanted his head to be buried in the mound, the white mound, facing France. And he said as long as his head, the head of Bran, the head of the raven, stayed in the mound, that England would be safe. But if the raven left, or if Bran left the mound, the head of Bran, then England would fall. So, initiated druid, Churchill went, oh no, we're at war, and the crows have fled, the ravens have fled. This was bad, this was not a good feeling. So, very quickly brought some ravens back to the Tower of London. Because obviously when the mound was destroyed and built over the Tower of London, the myth shifted, the myth changed. Instead of it being the head of Bran, ravens were brought into the mound. And you probably have heard the myth that if ravens ever leave the Tower of London, then England will fall. So another prophecy link, a magical link, and very powerful link with ravens and crows to the mythology of many, many countries. Now, I do think I've probably gone on for enough. I hope you've enjoyed this talk of crows and of ravens. I'd love you to go outside. I mean, I love spending time with them, I love feeding them and watching them. If you feel drawn to crow as a totem, or raven as a totem, though it's harder to see ravens, I know a lot easier to see crows, do go out there, spend a little time with the crows, feed them, watch how they communicate, watch their cleverness and their system of family and group, and maybe learn a little bit about the magical world of the crow, as there's a lot more to them than meets the eye. Thank you very much for watching my Totem Tuesday. I will see you next week.